For the 10th time this season, a victorious edition of the Postgame Scoreboard show. The number one Oregon Ducks, 39, Maryland 18. The Ducks winners, 21 points in Autzen Stadium. The number one team in the land stays undefeated for another week. Ryan Buckley, Will Ortner, Jordan Schultz here with you. Fellas, how are we doing?
I'm doing weird, kind of like how that
weird.
game.
That's fair.
It's weird. Like normally, I'd like to come in and be like, I'm doing elite, a la PJ Fleck. Like I'm out here killing it. But I just kind of feel like it was a weird Saturday all around. You avoided anything terrible happening. You didn't go full Miami, Mario Cristobal. But at the
a lot of chaos today that did not involve the Ducks.
At the same time, I don't feel like you're super happy about how you looked.
It wasn't a particularly satisfying win, was it, Schultz?
I don't know, what's the word? Herky-jerky, I think we've used a few different times over the last couple of seasons we've all hosted together to describe maybe a game or two throughout the Ducks season. This was a herky-jerky, hard-fought, gritty win, I feel like, for Oregon. It was
just a little off, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was just from the start, you kind of expected Oregon to keep their foot on this team's throat that they've literally never hosted before, and to start the game and to start the third quarter, it just wasn't that way. So a little scary, a little weird.
Yeah, so let's talk about that point in the game. I'm kind of looking at it as like the Ducks winning a grinder. I don't know why I'm considering it a grinder game. Maybe because it felt like you had to go such long stretches without the football, and we can talk a little bit later about whether that's potentially a blueprint to try and beat Oregon in the future with some ball control, because it seemed like they were really out of rhythm tonight, and there could be a couple reasons for that. I know we had a little bit of an O-line shuffle. We've had some personnel changes in the receiving group as well. So there's a lot of things that can go into it, but ultimately a game where you don't play your best, where you rack up a bunch of penalties, so it's not particularly clean, you still come away with a 3-touchdown victory. And I think all things considered, even though it didn't maybe feel right and look right at times, you got the right result.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about just finding a way to win in advance,
sure.
Right? Valvano said it best, survive in advance, and that's what you're doing right now if you're the Oregon Ducks, because your style points don't really matter. And, this is a bold take, but it's probably the correct one. Like, with this win, you probably convinced you're in the playoffs. You're going to be in the playoffs. If doomsday scenario happens and you lose next week to Wisconsin and you lose to UW, you're still probably getting into the playoff. You probably clinched a playoff spot.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And I think that that's fair to say.
Yeah.
But I think that going into the last three games, when you looked at them, this wasn't the game that you were worried about. The game that you were worried about was Wisconsin, because of what the weather could be like. And at times, that Wisconsin offense, when it's clicking, has looked really good. I mean, they took Penn State all the way into the third quarter in a really close game if they don't throw a bad pick six. So you didn't expect this one to be the one that you really had to sweat it out. You knew that the UW game is going to be weird because it's a rivalry game, and you're going to get their best shot because no matter what, their season is won, or at least there's a nice thing to talk about the season if they beat you. So this should have been the easy game, and it just didn't feel like that.
Yeah, it's also, and we talked with Dan Lanning about this on Primetime on Friday when he calls into the show, but it seems like they were due for a letdown at some point, and you're coming off even though it was a convincing victory, it seemed like an emotional victory going to Michigan, and this was the spot in your schedule that was kind of ripe for a letdown, and so it's not entire, but at the same time you also know you're trying to avoid it, and I think it's exceptionally hard for any football season, but especially one with college kids, to keep everyone engaged and get everyone's best every single week. And luckily, for this team, it's deep enough, talented enough, well coached enough that even when you don't get your absolute best effort, you can still win convincingly like they did today. And that's a big testament to all of their personnel that they have going into this thing. But I do want to focus in on really when the tide turned, because it seemed like the Oregon offense couldn't get much going early on, and there came a point at the start of the third quarter, and now Dan Lanning's been hearing for a week and a half about how the team can't score in the third quarter, that he just said, you know what, I'm done with all of this, like throw the kitchen sink at him, I don't care. And that led to a fake punt in which we saw Jordan Birch, all 295 pounds, in the open field, going 36 yards to then set up the Jernoris Wilson score. By the way, the record breaker from Dylan Gabriel. We haven't even mentioned that yet. Dylan Gabriel making college football history. We'll get more on that in just a minute. And then you follow it up with Josh Connerly converting the 2-point try at the end of it